been 10 years. You start to forget the things you should remember.
Hey, Ryan Stevens here. At this point, there's definitely some stuff out there on Call of Duty Ghosts. Microsoft press conference has aired at this point. But I got to take an extended look at it at an event last week, and I wanted to share some of the stuff I saw. First off, there's a dog. You're going to have a dog. They wouldn't go quite into the story, but basically the US is not in good shape, and the remnants of like the special forces, so you think like Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, etc. They've all kind of joined forces to be this last line of defense for wherever America's at this point. And that includes having a Navy SEAL dog. And it looks like a German Shepherd, but I did a little research, and it seems like they are actually called Belgian Malinoses. I may be pronouncing that wrong. They're slightly smaller. And they were talking about, in our interview, we heard that the dogs had like electrical nodes on their necks to like kind of control them and stuff. And they wouldn't go into gameplay details. And they said, hey, we know this stuff, but it may or may not be in the game. But it does kind of add like an extra layer. They said they really wanted to hit new gameplay experiences. And I think the dog really stood out to me. They also mentioned right off the bat that there's going to be kind of a mirror's edge mantling system. When there's like low cover and stuff, you'll be able to override things. I think jumping in the Call of Duty series has always been something that's there, and obviously in multiplayer there's some weird bunny hopping from time to time. But I think now there's going to be a little more of a flow when you're kind of going from place to place without implementing like a kind of a clunky first-person cover system. You can kind of still do it manually, but you can also kind of mantle over things or slide up against. And it sounded interesting. We didn't really see that quite in action except for little tiny snippets, but not in the straight gameplay walkthrough. They brought up AI, and I was like, oh, because Call of Duty, I mean, then whenever I saw that video where they put the difficulty on veteran and the guy just never fired a shot and he got through, it's sometimes, as well crafted and thought out the game is, sometimes it feels a little bit like a glorified light gun shooter. And yes, there are people run away from grenades. I'm not saying that the enemies are stupid, but it's not something up there with like an elite from Halo or the guys in like the first Fear game or something like that. And they mentioned AI, and then they said the AI is going to be for animals. Like there's going to be swarms of fish. There's big emphasis on underwater combat. I'll get to that later. That's actually what they showed us. But like birds and fish will respond to you. So they are putting in a lot of little details to kind of make things come a little bit more to life. They confirmed 60 frames per second. They confirmed next-gen systems. I think we kind of already knew that. And a lot of the tricks, when we get to the tech stuff, they said a lot of those tricks that they're using will be on the current gen systems, but not everything, like advanced tessellation and stuff. That's going to be kind of saved for the big guys, PS4 and whatever the Xbox is. Very brief talk about multiplayer. Focus on dynamic maps. I feel like Infinity Ward has not done this in the past. This was actually more of a Treyarch thing, you know, where there's the kind of little dynamic moving things, or there's that, like the crates moving up and down, or I know in some of their add-on maps, like you could like shoot some small like land bridges and have destructible environments. They wouldn't go into detail, but they said maps will have a big focus on being dynamic with traps. Things can flood. Sounded interesting. And then character customization. I think it's going to go way beyond your little logos that you unlock, and it's going to be, you can make your own soldier, which is going to be interesting. I am curious about that because, you know, usually you're assigned to, when you're playing multiplayer, you're assigned to an army or a guerrilla force or rebels, and you know, it switches up each time. So, and people don't play free-for-all all that often, and God, I don't even know if you can choose your, I don't think you can even choose. Maybe there's a preference, I can't remember, for free-for-all. So I think that's kind of funny as Halo 4 grabs some of that kind of experience and weapon unlock stuff. Now Call of Duty is kind of grabbing that, maybe that armor customization. I'm sure we're going to unlock funny mustaches and hats and haircuts and whatnot. Now it's time for tech stuff. They are brand new engine. They wouldn't tell me what their frame buffer is, but 60 frames per second. They talked a lot about helmets and masks, and but kind of talked around it, a little circumlocution. And I'm curious if it had anything to kind of call back to that weird teaser trailer, the live action one. But they said like that stuff's going to be incredibly detailed.
To inspire.
They're really, really into this thing called Sub D. I think they said Pixar created it. And they were showing us, they aimed down the sights in real time. They had a tech demo going, and the gun scope was kind of, it's a circular shape, but it's like an octagon. You can see the sides. And then they had dev commands on. They're running off a PC. And they could turn it on and off. And it was like crazy, crazy, amazing anti-aliasing. And that's probably making it way too simple, but the octagon became like a perfect circle. And they were projecting this, on like a big 30-foot screen. They also went on to show displacement mapping. And again, to me, it seemed, again, like glorified bump mapping, normal mapping. But in real time, they showed you the floor. And we were in the woods, not the jungle. It's definitely more of a woodsy feel. And the floor looks good. And then they were turning it off and on. And it just brings out this a crazy depth. They actually even put on kind of a developer view where you could actually see the triangles, the polys. They were outlined in yellow, and they looked at a cliff face. And again, they toggled it on and off, and it just became so much more realistic. But maybe not so much. And this is a side comment. But I am curious, I haven't seen the Xbox stuff yet at the time of this recording. But with the PlayStation 4 stuff, it is interesting to see. We like to talk about the uncanny valley, and we're always looking for that kind of leap in generation when it comes to graphics. And I'm curious if all these things like Sub D, advanced tessellation, and all these new types of displacement mapping and whatnot, individually, they're nice. But I think it's when they all come together, they kind of chord into what I think is going to be maybe a little more subtle, but the advanced look. The game looked great. I would love to, and we probably will do a side-by-side with the Battlefield stuff. They said that there's going to be a lot of sort of emotion driven to it as well, just to talk about the kind of Battlefield comparisons. They said in the single-player story, emotion's going to be a big thing, so that was kind of interesting. And that takes us to the gameplay demo. Underwater. We've been underwater in Call of Duty games before, but it was always kind of heavily scripted, not really quite that much to do except kind of like look at things under the water, maybe stab some people and get on dry land. This was played completely underwater. They had some sort of Russian gun that exists that can shoot underwater. And it was kind of a typical Call of Duty setup. It was you and a partner. I think it may have been your character's brother. Again, they're kind of quiet on the story. And you're swimming along, little frogmen sort of thing. You come across enemy combatants underwater. Kind of, you take them out. It's the typical, take the guy on the left, I'll take the guy on the right. They played perfectly, of course, for the demo. So, it was, there was a cute, good job. And they continued. They actually did one of their little, in the interest of time, and skipped the middle section. And it kind of went to, there was these enemy boats, on the surface of the water. And kind of how you'll drive a drone missile or something. There was a kind of a drone torpedo, and you drove it right into this big ship. And all the debris, all the blowback, crazy physics, those AI fish were scurrying around, just comes down. And again, like Battlefield, your leg is caught, but you did not have to press F to cut leg. Your buddy helps you out. And then it became kind of a race as all this debris is falling to kind of get to the end. It did still feel very kind of A to B, but for the point of a demo, I think developers tend to show these kind of vertical slices. The underwater stuff looked amazing. When we were in the woods, there were certain points, they went behind a waterfall, and they had the water cascading down with God rays, like the sun was beaming through in this little kind of, cave, I guess. Yeah, I guess it's a cave. And it looked great. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the difference between the engine on everything like we've seen with these kind of cross-platform things between current gen and next gen. But at this point, Infinity Ward, they've dropped the Modern Warfare moniker. I was a little worried that maybe Ghosts was going to be a little bit too much like Black Ops, the kind of idea of a small splinter team. But they're really kind of being the underdog. It's interesting, and I can't wait to see more. And also, dog stuff, really cool.